This isn't my first attempt to drive the Cliffhanger trail in Moab, Utah. Several years ago, I made it just past this point and I turned around because I didn't think I could make it off the trail by myself. Well, this time I'm back. I have a lot more experience. We're gonna make it. This trail doesn't mess around. Right out of the parking area, you immediately go down a series of big ledges. Choosing your line down this path is important because it's the difference between going off a 3 to 4 foot ledge and stepping down a smaller 1 to 2 foot ledge. You won't be able to see anything in front of you as you're driving down it, so make sure that you're all lined up before you get started. My rear passenger tire is about to tear off a giant chunk of rock. And I didn't actually notice this until I went back and looked at the video later. I have another angle of this from my spotting camera. Because I'm driving by myself and I don't have a spotter, I wanted a way to see where my tires are positioned on this trip. So I bought some wireless backup cameras. They're usually used for trailers. But I can walk out, set them on the ground, and then I can view the position of my Jeep and the tires on a little screen that I have on the dash. And this one is interesting because it catches the moment where my tires rip up the ledge as I go down it. This is the driver's view going down that first ledge, and I'm going to show you a lot of different camera angles of these obstacles. I like to know what I'm dealing with before I go to a trail, and I think it's interesting to see it from different perspectives so you can understand just what it's actually like. You'll probably notice that my style of driving is very slow and methodical, and that's definitely on purpose. I have to drive this vehicle home. It's my daily driver and I don't have a trailer. So my goal is to make it through the trail without trail damage, with everything working. There's another good channel called Trail Expedition, and if you watch his video of Cliffhanger, you can definitely see somebody take the more send-it approach to these obstacles. After the first series of ledges, you'll come to another very rocky, steep slope, and your option is to go down on the steeper right side of it to help you be prepared for a sharp left-hand turn down an obstacle, or you can come down on the left-hand side, but you would have to drop over a 4 to 5 foot, very undercut, very tall ledge. Here's the sharp turn towards the driver's side so that you can crawl down this boulder and this sort of a ramp to the lower area. You'll see on the far right that extremely tall ledge that my vehicle is really not capable of going down or climbing up, although some more built rock crawlers might be able to do it. Right behind this boulder is a gap, and that gap can kind of grab you as you're trying to go up or down in this section. Here's the driver's view of making that sharp turn and coming down over that boulder. For whatever reason, I've seen vehicles of every size just get stuck here. I think it's a very awkward obstacle, and because you're turning, it's that much harder to line up your tires in the right spot. On my first attempt at this trail, this is where I turned around. I came up to this obstacle and it's extremely steep, and at the time there was no winch point on the higher side, and I really wondered if I made it down this obstacle, if I could make it back up. And since I was by myself, if I couldn't make it back up, I would be waiting for somebody or I'd be walking into town. By this point, you've spent like 45 minutes to an hour just trying to get 100 yards down the trail from the parking lot, and it's definitely a wake-up call saying, I hope you have the time and the technique to do this trail. And so the first time I was here, I was definitely not ready. Some people crawl their driver's side over the boulder to the left, but I don't like being that close to the edge, and I also don't like how that puts one side a lot higher than the other as you're going over the ledge. So I chose just to slowly ease down it relatively straight on. It's definitely tall, and you have to be there in person to really appreciate it. The rocks at the bottom are there for a reason, and I would encourage you to stack some rocks if you need something to land on or help climbing up. Congratulations, we're barely out of the parking lot and we've already had to tackle this many difficult obstacles. I don't have a really good angle of it, but this section is a slightly off-camber uphill slope with a few ledges on it. And you can either be off-camber as you go towards the passenger side, towards the cliff wall, or you can be closer to the drop-off on the driver's side where the embankment there gets kind of loose because it's crumbly dirt. There were a lot of bicyclists on this trail. There was one guy hiking, and there were a couple of guys on dirt bikes. And without fail, every one of them made it to the top faster than me, which just tells you how slow and how painstaking progress is when you're driving a large vehicle. If you watch my driver's side tires, you can actually see the back tires sliding around a little bit and the front tire climbing some ledges. So this section is definitely not as flat and easy as it looks. The driver's view gives you a better idea of the ledge at the beginning of this section, and then as I come up and over this ledge, you'll see the loose dirt and the edge of the slope going off to the left. and you can also see how off-camber you would be as you get closer to the cliff wall. So you just have to make a choice here. Like a lot of Cliffhanger, it's a balance between how uncomfortable you want to get versus how direct the line is. This view also gives you a better idea of why I didn't want to go too far on the driver's side, because you can see that the hill just immediately slides off to the left and it's a bunch of really loose rock and dirt. After you finish this section, you get to spend some time on a really nice and very scenic climb before you get to the next obstacle, and it just winds up and does some switchbacks, and it has great views as you're going up. If there's a theme to the obstacles on Cliffhanger, it's that they make you really uncomfortable. This big rock slab was very undercut, and you had to climb onto it at some point. There's a number of places that you could climb onto this slab, but all of them were kind of awkward, and you have to immediately turn to the driver's side, which risks your rear tire sliding off or you sliding off and rolling over towards your driver's side. It might have been possible to drive up the very end of this obstacle instead of going about halfway down it and turning up, although it was a lot taller right here in front of the hood. You'll see as I climb up this that there's not even a car length of room across the top of this. You have to turn immediately, and if you turn too soon, that's how you risk rolling over towards your passenger side and falling off the ledge. One convenient aspect of these wireless trailer backup cameras is that when I'm using them to spot myself, they're small enough that I can just roll over them and keep going as I go. Although occasionally I did clip the antennas and knock them over. This is the famous Z-turn obstacle on Cliffhanger, and I think there's a good argument that it might be the hardest obstacle on the trail. You have multiple boulders that are tire height, there are gaps between those boulders that are tire height, you're making sharp turns to the right and then to the left to try to thread through those boulders. It's just a very difficult obstacle to plan a line and to follow that line all the way through. I get stuck pretty quick here, and that's because the rear passenger tire has fallen down into this gap between the rocks, and one of two things is happening. Either my rear differential keeps on catching because the passenger tire is down so low, or it just can't climb its way out of that hole because there's a lot of sand and dust and there's just not enough traction to pull it straight up that rock. Situations like these are usually a good time to turn on your front lockers to help pull you out. However, there's still a lot of turns as I weave to the right and then to the left, and if you've driven with your front lockers on and really big tires, you'll know that you just can't turn while the lockers are on. So I don't want to do that yet because then I'll be just traveling in a straight line. The solution here is actually pretty simple. You just have to swallow your pride and just throw a bunch of rocks for a few minutes, because all you really need is a couple of extra inches of clearance. While that poor guy is stacking rocks, let me show you the driver's view and the line we're trying to make. From right here, this looks like a whole lot of nonsense. But there's three big boulders that actually guide us to the top. The first is the giant slab-like boulder to the left, and that's going to be where our driver's side tires go up. Just to the right of that is a smaller boulder immediately in front of the Jeep, and you can see lots of small rocks piled up. Our passenger side tires are going to go up that, so the middle of the vehicle would ideally go above that gap between them. The third boulder is this one casting a dark shadow directly in front of us. As we climb those first two boulders and we've positioned our tires, then we have to make a sharp right to go around that boulder instead of climbing it, and then another sharp left to continue back up the trail. We really don't want to get wedged down in between this group of boulders in that kind of low area in the middle. So hopefully, as I climb these first two, I can immediately start climbing up and out to the right. Nothing ever goes to plan though, so in this case I've gotten my rear passenger tire stuck, and before I can even try to thread my way through, I have to stack some rocks to at least get over the first set of boulders. This view from my spotting camera also helps explain what's going on. So you see the front tires are going up more or less where I wanted them, but then I get too far towards the driver's side, and that's what put the rear tire in a hole. After a couple attempts to back up and reposition, it's still not going to get me anywhere, and so I'll have to just get out and stack rocks. Right now though, you can see how you have to turn to avoid this boulder right in front of the bumper. The closer I get to it, you can see that it's actually really large. We'll just stick with this view to show you how I get out. This is after stacking rocks, and it got me the clearance I need, and it's not that hard to roll forward. And you see turning passenger side to avoid the rock, and then right after this turning back driver to get the rear tires around it, and then there you go. It's always funny when all you needed to get over an obstacle was just an extra inch of clearance. I included this clip from when I was driving up to the main Cliffhanger obstacle because this little shelf here is so narrow and the drop was so big that I think this is one of the scariest parts of the drive. Not the actual Cliffhanger obstacle, but just the trail in front and behind it. This is the Cliffhanger obstacle, and it's actually not that complicated, it's just fairly extreme. Watch me right here when I put a couple of nice big scratches into my right passenger fender. That's what happens when you hug the wall too close. You're not actually that close to the edge of the cliff, so to speak, and I don't think it's really that dangerous going down these obstacles. You have to do something extremely wrong to fall off the side of the cliff. But they are big ledges, and you do need to go pretty slow to stay in control. The really difficult part is actually at the bottom, where you have to thread between some fairly large rocks. After you actually get down the ledges, then you're faced with this really awkward position. You've got one tire way up and one tire way down, and one tire is riding up the wall, and you're trying to turn at the same time to avoid this big chunk of rock that my spotting camera is sitting on. And it's just tough, but if you crawl slowly, you can just go right on top of it. For years, I wanted to take a drone to this section and get this awesome drone shot with the drone flying out in space above the drop and getting the Jeep going along the cliff and going down this obstacle, but my drone was broken for this trip. So you'll have to settle for this point of view driver shot, which is still pretty scary. If you'd like to see this obstacle in more detail and get a scarier view over the cliff edge, I do have another video where I walk down this obstacle with a 360 cam on top of a 9-foot pole, and that will definitely give you some very scary views over the edge. For anyone that's afraid of heights, the section of trail that's right after the Cliffhanger obstacle is definitely going to be the scariest part of the entire trail. There's some off-camber spots even though it looks pretty flat, and you are just feet away from the edge. So this part right here, no obstacles, by far the scariest. That may have been the showstopper obstacle, but there are still a number of things you have to get over to get to the end of the trail. This section of sloped rock was really difficult for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's very steep on the right side, and you'll just have your tires spinning trying to get up. On the left side, it's a little more shallow and more approachable, but if you drive up on the left side, you're going to immediately be stuck with your bumper right into the embankment. It's really hard to turn without getting really off balance at the top if you have driven up that left side. And I really didn't want to do that, but I couldn't get any grip in the middle. I can see how some people would just hit the gas and make up this with a little bit of tire spin, but again, that's really not an option for me, just because I'm trying not to break things, and any kind of momentum or hitting the gas means you're more likely to have a failure. At the top, I have to do a multi-point turn and back up a couple of times because I'm just too nose in to this steep wall right in front of the Jeep. And if you turn and try to drive out of it, it's going to put you really off camber. The last thing I want to do is roll over as I'm trying to climb out of this obstacle. If you are about to run over your spotting camera, that definitely means you're in the wrong spot. If you watch the horizon right here, you'll see how leaned over I actually was trying to turn out of this obstacle. When you get here, you are almost done. It's one last big ledge to drive over before the last couple hundred yards to the edge of the cliff at the very end of the trail. This is a pretty tall ledge. You can step down it, but to some extent you just have to let your tires drop a little bit. I hope you're thinking that I make it look easy because I'm stepping down these ledges, and the reason for that is that I'm actually watching my spotter camera very closely to put my tires in the very best place to step down with the smallest amount of drop. The view at the end of this trail is so amazing that it's just hard to describe. It's easily one of the best views in Moab, and that's saying a lot because there are a lot of really cool places you can get to. Take some time to rest at the top because you've actually made it halfway. All those obstacles we just went up, you have to go back down. And some of them are a lot different, and some of them are still quite difficult going the other direction. I have footage from the entire return trip, but I think we'll save that for another video. In the meantime, I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope you learned some about the obstacles. And if you happen to have been to Cliffhanger, or you plan on going, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear about your experience on this trail. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.